Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on SQF Edition 10 Insights Before the Release with Bureau Veritas. My name is Allison Carlson, and I will be your moderator today. I am the training specialist here at Bureau Veritas North America. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. I do want to get a little bit of background information about Bureau Veritas before I hand everything over to our speakers. Bureau Veritas is a world leader in inspection and certification services. Created in 1828, the group has approximately 82,000 employees located in more than 1,600 offices and laboratories across the globe. Bureau Veritas helps its clients improve their performance by offering services and innovative solutions in order to ensure that their assets, products, infrastructure, and processes meet standards and regulations in terms of quality, health and safety, environmental protection, and social responsibility. Bureau Veritas is a business to society service company that contributes to positively transforming the world we live in. We work closely with our clients to address the critical challenges they face and to link these to emerging aspirations of society. We work with companies to build and protect their reputations, supporting them as they forge the foundation of trust that are built to last. And two things I do want to hone in on here is our inspection and certification. Our inspections involve on-site verification that products, services, assets, and facilities meet specification and operate as intended. They cover a wide range of services designed to control quality, verify quantities, and meet regulatory requirements. Our inspection services help companies have confidence in the reliability and integrity of their products, assets, and systems. As an independent third-party accreditation certification body, we provide certification services to attest that management systems and services and personnel comply with specific standards. Equipment and products can be certified to meet sector-specific or industry standards, international or local voluntary standards, or manufacturer clients' requirements. Certification enables companies to access new markets, strengthen their brands, or simply obtain a license to operate. And a few housekeeping things here. We will be keeping all microphones and cameras off during the webinar. Any questions, please use the Q&A chat box that I do have up. You can submit anything anonymously, so please utilize that. We would love to get every question answered as possible. If we don't, our speakers will get back to you via email afterwards. This webinar also will be recorded, and we will be sending out a follow-up email on Thursday with that recording to all registered parties. And then please participate in the polling questions. We'd love to hear, where you guys are from, what do you need more from us at Bureau Veritas, and we want to meet our clients' needs. So let me introduce you to our speakers. First off, we have Gary Smith. Gary Smith has over 30 years of experience in the food safety industry, spanning roles as a regulator, buyer, and a supplier, an auditor, and a training director. He has contributed to several influential committees, including the SQFI Technical Advisory Committee, the FFC 22,000s Advisory Board, and the Food Safety Service Providers. And then we also have Dr. Prit Hora here. He is Bureau Veritas's food certification specialist. He holds his PhD in animal science and brings over 20 years of experience in the food safety and quality. He has worked with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and across the manufacturing sector, supporting clients in SQF, BRCGS, FDA, and the SFCAR compliance. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Gary Smith, and we'll get everything started here.
All right, thanks, Allison. Let me go ahead and share my screen here now. I'll turn on my camera. And the way there so I can do that. All right, there we go. So thanks, everybody, and excited to be here to talk about SQF version 10. Now, notice we say here that we're going to do a preview before the launch. So as we know, the official version 10 final standard is not out yet, but we'll talk certainly about that. So what the What the agenda here is, obviously Allison did a great job of our introduction there. We'll talk a little bit about the what's the current status of version 10, where are we at now? What do we know as of we just received an update from SQF on Friday. I will go through part A for those of you who will even talk about what part A is of the standard and some updates, some potential. And then Prit will go through modules 2 and module 11, which are part of the food manufacturing standard, again, giving some previews or glimpses into some of the conversations and what some may be coming. And then obviously we'll do a quick Q&A at the end of our presentation. So we should be going for about 45 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to you. And hopefully you'll have some questions for us. So what we have to do to start the conversation is talk about, first off, the SQF version 10 final code has not been released. Now, I think I'm pretty comfortable that the code is final, but it has not been released. Why not? Well, and first off, before I get to why not, this webinar is not reflective of any kind of insider information or anything that we know more than most of what has been released to the public. It is true, Prit and I both did participate in technical working groups that helped to come up with the final version, but we haven't seen it, and no one has seen it because it hasn't been publicly released yet. So this is basically, SQF did a great job of putting the information out for public comment through May through July, which is the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere timeline. There's a lot of information that went out. A lot of people commented. A lot of the comments came back to the working groups to review and discuss, take some things into account, change some things. Not so. So SQF, spent a lot of time and put a lot of energy throughout this whole year in updating and getting ready for a version 10 launch. What prompted this change? Two things. One, the biggest thing was that GFSI put out a new benchmarking document at the end of 2024. And for those of you who may or may not know, SQF is one of the certification program owners, or CPOs, that is benchmarked to GFSI. So GFSI putting out a new benchmarking requirements document at the end of 2024, thus triggers the CPOs who want to maintain their recognition to update their standards to make sure they reflect whatever's in the current latest version of the GFSI benchmarking document. So when GFSI started, their benchmarking document in 2024, that then prompts the CPOs like SQFI to say, well, if there are things lacking in our standard, then we'll have to update it to make sure that we reflect, what's in the new GFSI benchmark document. So the reason for the delay, why isn't SQF out yet, and why are we having this webinar now if it hasn't out yet? So try to answer a couple of those questions. So the initial launch of SQF was supposed to be in August of this year, the version 10 final. And then it was going to be September 15th. And when it was September 15th, that's when we set the date for this webinar, because we wanted to make sure that we give, our clients and industry, a good understanding of what are the new updates for the webinar, or for the standard. So that was why we scheduled the webinar, and we actually had started marketing it and whatnot when SQF came and said, GFSI has now paused their benchmarking process to new standards against their new benchmarking document until probably Q1 of 2026. So the reason SQFI is like, okay, well, let's hold on and wait, is because what they don't want to do is, let's say, for example, they released the standard now. So they have, version 10 out there right now, but it hasn't gone through the GFSI benchmarking process yet. And then GFSI comes back to them and says, hey, SQF, your food safety culture part of your standard doesn't have a requirement that it has to be a written program like is now in the GFSI benchmarking document. So you need to update that. So then GFS or then SQF would have to update their version, and now they'd have to have a version 10.1. Right. So they would have had to. So basically, what they want to do is they want to get through the benchmarking process with GFSI. They want to make sure everything's aligned and in order. And then they launch version 10 so they don't have to launch it, go through the benchmarking process, and then potentially relaunch a update version because of changes required through the benchmarking process. So that is why the delay is. And that is why SQF is waiting until they finish the benchmarking document process with GFSI before they launch or release version 10. So that's where we're at. So we haven't seen the final. So this is our best guess. This is a preview, as we say in the title. This is what we think. This is based off of discussions. This is based off of discussions with stakeholders outside of SQF. This is based off of, a lot of conversations over the last, 12 months on what could be potentially, probably, kind of maybe in the final version. So all that being said is, we'll give you our best guess and we will see where we go. So first off, again, I'm going to talk about part A of the standard. And a lot of you may be like, I didn't even know there was a part A. Obviously, part A comes first, right? Because it's A. Well, what is in part A of the standard? This is from version 9, this little context here, this little index here. But basically, part A of the code includes things like scoring, the management, like, your audit windows, unannounced audits, ratings, certification, withdrawing certification, suspending certification, all the ways that the standard is managed, right? How you write a report, what are the time, corrective actions, what's the timing for when you have to have corrective actions, when's the time do you have to have a certificate, all the things around the requirements of managing the standard, right? How it gets managed. We call that essentially scheme management, right? How the standard is to be run by the auditors, by the certification body, by SQF, by you as the certified sites. What are the expectations? What does it mean to run it all? Part B of which Prit is going to go over for us is the content, right? That's the standard. That's what we're auditing or audited against, module 2. And I will say for version 10, module 2 is going to be a bit more universal for all the different sectors. Right now, you'll have they're very similar. It's like 98%, 96, 98% from module 2 for food manufacturing and module 2 for, pet food and module 2 for storage and distribution. They're very, very similar, but there are a few minor differences. With version 10, they want module 2 to go back like it was in version 8 to being all the same. Everybody's module 2 is the same. So that's the intent, as I understand it, for version 10 is to go back to pretty much everybody. Module 2 stays the same. And then the GMP modules, essentially, which is modules 2 through 17, again, depending on what your sector is, Prit's going to give us an overview of module 11, which is certainly by far and away the most popular of the standards, the modules, which applies to those who are conducting, basic food manufacturing. And that's what he's going to cover in the webinar. So I just wanted to a lot of times people will be like, I didn't even know there was a part A. I just thought it was like, what's the standard? Well, if you look at, version 9 now, and when version 10 comes out, you'll see there's a part A, which is getting started, steps to take for certification. This is for new initial certifications, but it's also how do we run the scheme? What's the expectations on managing of the scheme? So that's part A versus part B. So part B is the part that affects, the sites certainly much more, because that's what the audit is against. But part A is really managing, the certification bodies, the auditors, and then obviously to let you know what that process is. Okay, so let's get into one of the big potential areas of conversation around part A, and that is scoring. So there's been a lot of discussions with retailers, stakeholders, customers, sites on scoring. So there was, it's gone from everywhere to we should just stop scoring on the audits, right? It's a certification audit, that conversation was on the table. Let's just take away scoring. Or maybe, we have to, something with the scoring is not quite where we want it to be and we needed to adjust it, right? And why is that? So we came to some conclusions that based on all the conversations with stakeholders and whatnot, that the audits are still going to continue to be scored moving forward. So version 10 audits will be scored. But some of the concerns or some of the feedback that stakeholders or retailers are talking about, scores are too high. There's not a good distinction between, best in class and, good and fair and poor, right? It's just like all the scores are, 95 and above. All the scores are above 95. And so we can't, there's no tiering, there's no delineation between, those really great sites and those sites that are good and whatnot. So that was a lot of feedback that SQF heard, is that the audit scores were too high. Other focus and feedback that they heard was that there's too much focus on the ratings, right? The sites are really focused on the ratings. The auditors are focused on the ratings, right? The site's got an E rating for the last 2 years. I don't want to be the one to not give them an E, because then they'll get mad and they won't want me to come back and audit them anymore and all those kind of things. So those were kind of some, broad concepts going into version 10 that needed to be addressed. So that was the intent of version 10, to kind of address those things. So one of the conversations was, well, what about scores? How do you go about lowering scores? Certainly one of the things that SQF is doing is what they call their integrity program, where they're following up after audits and going out and visiting the site and say, does that audit reflect what is actually going on in the location today? Many of us as customers, as buyers, as going out and doing approved supplier audits ourselves, we'll follow up, an SQF audit or another GFSI recognized audit and be like, boy, that doesn't seem to reflect what I'm seeing with what's on paper, right? I mean, the audit, they scored a 98, but they don't know what, their food safety plan is supposed to be or anything like that. So that might be a bit extreme, but, making the audit truly reflect what's going on. And SQF has put together an integrity program and professional updates, and they're working with auditors and certification bodies to make the audits more robust. And one of those ways, we'll talk in just a minute about the change of the audit process, is to reflect that as well. Add some type of a multiplier. So right now, as everybody knows, how you come up with the score for SQF is, minor is, -1 point, major is -5 points, the critical is -50. So if you can add, when the auditor at the exit meeting is giving you your list of nonconformities, you know what your score is. And the hope was, can we get away from the site really knowing what the score is while the auditor's there? Is there some way we could make it so that it's less about the score and more about the findings and the opportunity to try to get better, right? Because that's the intent, right? The intent of the audit is compliance, obviously, to the standard, but it's to drive improvement. It's to help the site identify those areas where they need to improve. Rather than, oh, we got an E, we've gotten an E the last 5 years, we better get an E or else, which is, many conversations that have been had around the auditing table, certainly in the last few years. So what are some potential options on the multiplier? What could that be? Repeat findings could have an additional 50% score deduction. So if it's a minor, this year it was -1 point, the auditor sees the exact same thing next year, maybe it's -2 points. Or if it's a major, this year it was a major, next year also a major, instead of -5 points, now it's -10. Again, these are options. We haven't seen the final yet. We don't know exactly for sure. There was also a discussion around having what they call core elements. These are the true parts of the standard. This is different than mandatory. Try not to get those two things, messed up or confused. This is having, those core elements of the standard be more weighted. So things like approved suppliers, because we know many times, contaminated ingredients coming into a facility drives recalls, right? environmental monitoring program, the food safety plan, management commitment, allergen management, foreign material, sanitation. Those are the true, critical food safety core part of the standard that if the facility struggles in any of those areas, there's a higher risk that they could have a contamination event, or potentially even a recall. So trying to identify and trying to figure out how do we weigh those a bit more so a finding there has more of an effect on the score than somebody forgot to fill in a training record or something like that, right? Or there's cobwebs in the warehouse or whatever. So those are all conversations around how to kind of drive that score change a little bit. Another area is on, again, less focus on the ratings. So, in order to do that, one of the conversations was around, well, let's just get away from the E and G ratings. Let's just remove them because either you're certified or you're not. So, remove the E and the G. So all the focus is just on, less on the ratings, less on the score, more on the issues, more on the opportunities. So, have a communication plan. So SQF, had talked about putting together a communication plan with all stakeholders, right? Manufacturers, retailers, customers, to remove the focus on the ratings and focus more on the findings and how do we get better, right? And this would be, if you're a facility and you've put, your SQF practitioners bonus, if they don't get an E rating, they get, they don't get their bonus, or they get less bonus if they get a G versus an E, or a certain score or anything like that. And I know a lot of people do it because it's an easy thing to do, right? It's easy to measure. But try to, so SQF is going to be putting out communication, trying to minimize all stakeholders focus so much on the ratings and even the score, right? I know a lot of folks who've set their food safety objectives, they focus on getting an E rating or getting a, 95 and above or whatever. Again, trying to minimize that so it's focusing more on the findings and less on the rating, less on the score. So the potential recommendation is remove the E and G ratings and everybody's a C. If you get certified, you're a C rating. There still would be a certification for needing a surveillance audit if the site scored from 70 to 79, but basically anybody with an 80 or above, you get a C rating. That's it. There's no difference, right? But you still get a score, so there's a difference between an 81 and a 97, but they're both C ratings. They're not an E, G, C, or whatever. So that is the potential, again, to help focus less on the rating, less on the score, more on the opportunities, more on the findings. Okay. And then the last part of Part A update, and we talked about, again, more robust audits. Right now, it's very much, a lot of us would call it a checklist audit, right? 2.1.1.1, food safety policy, right? Has it been signed? Has it been posted, right? 2.1.1.2, who's the practitioner, right? Food safety culture, all those things, right? You start at the beginning and you just work your way down. SQF wants to amend that and revise that. And they want, going into version 10, they're going to want auditors to focus on what they call a vertically integrated audit. And you see the little flow chart there on the side. And basically what that means is you take one of the products from the scope of certification and you say, okay, well, we're going to focus everything around the audit on sampling for this process and this product. So we're going to look at the food safety plan first. And we're going to look at who are the suppliers that go into the input. We're going to pick 3 of those, and we're going to do our approved supplier reviews and look at their documents and all those things off of that. We're going to look at their receiving paperwork, and we're going to look at their C of A's. And we're going to look at, have there been any new product developments within this product line in the last 12 months? And let's focus on those, and let's look at the reviews and the documentation for that. Have you done a traceability exercise on this document or on this product? And if not, we'll pick it for the traceability exercise, which I'll talk about more in just a second. Who are the employees that work on the line? Well, let's look at their training records. Let's look at any of the food safety checks. Let's look at the food safety records for that line. Foreign material checks for that line. So it's really diving in and really digging into one of the products and one of the processes and using the parts of the audit to sample within that process compliance around, the entire standard. So it's a sampling. It's not, it's not everything. It's not line by line. It's not checklist. It's focusing on one part of the process, one product, one process, and figuring out how the standard applies to every stage and part of that process. So that would be, a vertically integrated audit. So what might that look like if you're, as well as, auditors will now be having and conducting a traceability exercise during the audit. I know some do, some don't, but this will now be expected that auditors will be doing a traceability exercise during the audit. So they'll pick a product and say, okay, we're going to run a traceability exercise on that. And what that means is, okay, you made this product on May 15th. All right. And you have 12 ingredients that went into making that product. Well, one of those ingredients, I want to see when it was received. I want to see how much of it was received on that date. And then, obviously some of it was used to make that item, right? How much of the total item was produced on May 15th? And where did it all go? Do you still have any of it in the warehouse? How many customers did it go out to? Yada, yada. And we want to do that, during the audit in a timed event and see how it goes. And that's a traceability exercise during the audit. As I said, auditors are kind of at their discretion to do it now, but with version 10, the request is that it will be done for everybody. So everybody will do a traceability exercise during their audit going forward once version 10 becomes implemented. So those are some of the proposed potential changes as part of Part A. So I wanted to, thanks again for your attention and time to that. We'll see when the final comes out. We'll see how close we got to our guesses, but those are what we think. Based off of the little bit that we know, that's what we kind of think may be in there. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Allison and over to Prit.
Thank you so much, Gary. All right, Dr. Hora, it's your turn to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today for this webinar, which is obviously a lot of questions would be there at the end of the day, so I'm just trying to understand. And thank you, Gary, for very nice, elaborate presentation on that Part A. So as Gary said, I would be more concentrating on Part B, which is primarily the system elements, which is Module 2. And also, I would also like to talk about system elements as compared to food manufacturing Module 11, which is GMP, things of the side, So let me bring it here, and we will be able to show you what exactly. Hopefully, you can see this screen now, and this is what we will be talking today. What are the preview updates? Like, what is kind of like the updates that we are looking forward to as far as edition 10 is concerned, and how it is going to impact those food safety programs in the site. I would say preparations going forward, and what the action steps that site should be taking to make sure they are complying with those specifically updated edition 10 requirements. But again, as I said, Gary has already emphasized earlier, I was part of that food, technical working group for food manufacturing. But again, those proposals are still in pipeline. They haven't been decided. Whenever there is a final version, we will know exactly what it is. But I can certainly give you the snapshot, what to expect. And again, that's not a final draft or not. The slides will give you some kind of a preview what is coming. Again, it's not final. So let's move on to the next slide here. This is about the food manufacturing. That's what I will be talking about, the Part B system elements, specifically Module 2, which will be consistent across all the food commodities moving forward with Edition 10. And obviously, a large part of that will be Module 11, which is GMP requirements, and certainly we'll go from there. So one of the foremost updated proposed changes in SQF Edition 10 comes with the food safety culture plan. Obviously, this is one of the most sought after, and based on my experience, whenever I go to audit a lot of facilities, yes, it's a big challenge for the sites where particularly the employees there is a large turnover of employees coming in and going out. So obviously, retention of the employees could be a key in developing a very robust food safety culture plan. The idea is to own that you do have accountability. So basically, what they are proposing at this stage for food addition 10, as far as food safety culture plan is concerned, the site need to build and maintain a comprehensive food safety plan. So that will be measurable, and all those food safety objectives, the KPIs, key performance indicators, must be measurable. They should be looked after, and there should be some kind of accountability, defining performance metrics, and also to evaluate the effectiveness. It's not just providing those performance metrics, but also to see how effective they are and what the sites can do to ensure that those are really, I would say, embedded into the food safety plan. And the idea is to make sure the food safety is the paramount in this case, So, and documented continuous improvement processes. So what we are looking at here is basically documentation is the key. How you are ensuring that you have a definite plan for continuous improvement process in your food safety programs and also your food safety plan, how it is embedded into your systems where your employees are taking care of those things. They are responsible for what they are doing. They're accountable for, and on top of it, they do understand the importance of trainings and accountability as far as taking care of those food safety programs is concerned, obviously to mitigate those risk factors from all kinds of food safety hazards. So here, the major thing that I would recommend with the sites to make sure there is a definite leadership commitment, whether it is for providing resources, providing trainings, adequate trainings, not only just the trainings, providing those adequate trainings to the employees and ensuring those trainings are effective as far as food safety hazards or control of those food safety hazards is concerned at the site. And also staff engagement at all levels, not only like the leadership, but also at every step in the production process, every staff that is involved is completely engaged and understands their responsibilities. And that would be the key as far as the sites who are endeavoring to have a robust food safety culture plan. That's what would be the key as well as the auditors will be looking into in the addition 10. But again, it's not 100% sure. But again, these are some of the things that you should expect to see in addition 10. The key is it's a structured requirement with defined objectives and the measurable outcomes. So it's the site's accountability and responsibility to make sure those measurable outcomes are effective. And if they are not effective, they should be taken care of as soon as possible. So moving on to the next important, section would be, this is a completely new clause, formal change management protocol. So obviously, some of the sites will be really looking forward to how to include this a new element, which is or new clause that would be introduced in addition 10. It is dedicated clause on change management. So what does the change management means, So it is basically you're documenting processes for evaluating and controlling risks in plant processes, So what you have to do is exactly like what your changes are in terms of your food processing activities, in terms of change of equipment, in terms of changes in plant layout, how you have documented those and evaluated those risks as you make those changes in the facility and whether they are effective. So in order to make sure they are effective, obviously the site will need some competent individuals to perform risk assessments. And those risk assessments are all about looking for hazards and how to mitigate those risk factors, whether they are microbiological, chemical, or physical hazards, and to some extent allergenic hazards if certain sites are looking into those processes as part of your processing activities for certain commodities. So the key would be here to evaluate and controlling risks from operational changes, whatever they could be, as we have just talked about, and increased recognition from poorly managed changes that could compromise food safety. So the idea is there should be a program or there should be a step where competent individuals are performing risk assessments which are compatible with the operations at the site. So for that, site need to establish structural protocols to assess impacts and implement those controls as soon as possible, and they should be controlled and traceable, as we just talked about. So this is again a mandatory clause. This will be a new clause to implement change process that could impact food safety at the site. So just making sure that yes, you guys do understand those detailed requirements for those, and obviously if there is a training requirement that is required, then obviously Bureau Veritas is there to help the sites in order to ensure that they are towards the right path as far as formal change management protocol is concerned. So the next important thing that is again is going to be a mandatory clause. At this moment, environmental monitoring is not a mandatory as far as edition 9 is concerned. So it is going to be risk-based assessment to design environmental monitoring programs. And this will be tailored to site operational risk and environments. And the site's obligation is to provide that they do have that environmental monitoring program, which is compatible with the risks at the site and compatible with the environmental conditions that are prevalent at the site during manufacturing, during operations, processing, packaging, whatever that could be, storage, and what other requirements are. So it is again a mandatory clause. Sites will now have to have an environmental monitoring program to prove that it is effective and it is not contributing towards any potential hazards that may compromise the food safety or implicate your food products that you may be processing. The next slide shows about, again, the training and competency assessments. Again, I would club this together with the food safety culture to some part, not absolutely all of it, but in the proposed changes for SQF Edition 10, SQFI is looking forward to how the trainings of the employees is actually conducted. And they would like to see if it's competency-based, based on the skills and the qualifications that the employee holds for whatever responsibilities they are being asked for. And also, not only ensuring the training is competency-based, but also validating whether employees' competencies are adequate. Through various means, there are certain ways you can do with the quizzes, the trainings, follow-ups, following with the employees any difficulties or deficiencies that they might have. So the idea is to validate, and the best way I believe as a part of the auditor, what I've seen is the site should be endeavoring to make sure the trainings that have been provided to the employees are being followed up for efficiencies and competencies, and they are very much into the program, and they understand the impact if they are not really trained well on the processes they might be controlling. So evaluation tools to verify knowledge, retention, and practical application. There are various types of evaluation tools that can be used. And then including onboarding and recurring training. This includes both, like onboarding and recurring trainings. It's not about just once the employee comes to the site, he's been trained and then forgotten about the trainings. But yes, the recurring training is essential as far as competency-based training is concerned of the employees. This will be a shift towards proactive, evidence-based, and employee-driven food safety systems. And this will also contribute towards workforce engagement and accountability, and that is the key here. So In my view, it aligns well with the internal audit process and positive food safety culture plan. As I said, it is entwined with the food safety culture plan that site may develop and I would say put into place for their site. So the next slide shows about centralization of records and documentation. So consolidating program documentation and record keeping into a unified section, that would be the key. And there have been a lot of repetitions of records and documentation in the current edition 9. So basically what SQFI is enduring to put forward in edition 10 is to make sure that there is some kind of consolidation as far as records and documentation is concerned. And it should be consistent and in a centralized control. And obviously there should be only access to documents to the authorized individuals, not to say easy access to documents, but obviously the right documentation is available to the people who are looking forward for that. And what this will do is it will reduce duplication. As I said, certain elements for looking for certain records and documentation, which was repetition. It will reduce duplication. It will improve access to records and documentation, easy accessibility, and will help facilities manage records more efficiently. And that was the idea behind making sure that this is emphasized as far as centralization of records and documentation is concerned, making it more efficient. That's what the key is here. The next one is talking about the corrective and preventive action. So sites are required to document clear CAPA, corrective and preventive action implementation. They should perform sound root cause analysis using specialized tools. These days we have, because if you look into edition 9, there was not a specific requirement. They're looking forward to have a sound root cause analysis and also specifying what tools you have used. It could be Six Sigma, it would be Kaizen, it would be using Pareto charts or whatever you're using, the fishbone technique. Edition 10 hopes that sites will come up with a plan and document it. So to ensure, again, it's the idea is to ensure the root cause analysis is really looking forward to the issues that may prevent any reoccurrence of those issues. So root cause analysis is done to correctly identify the causes and ensure long-term compliance and risk control. That obviously helps if the root cause analysis has been correctly performed. Identification of methods used for root cause analysis, we just talked about. There could be any method that site may be using, and corrections and deficiencies are identified accurately and timely. And again, the idea behind was to ensure efficient management of non-conformances to prevent any reoccurrence of those similar issues from the past. Cleaning and sanitation, again, consolidation. Allergen control section also included cleaning and sanitation. So basically they are looking forward to, again, this has not been finalized. It will be only when the final edition 10 comes up, we will know, but these are some of the thoughts that are going forward and combining into one section, making sure the cleaning and sanitation is covered in one section for the easier management of audit process and CAPA process. So that would be one of the other highlights in edition 10 that are proposed. So regarding reintroduction of SQF, this is again a very important thing that SQFI would be introducing this in the edition 10 is to conduct required internal audits to identify and address gaps ahead of certification audit. So this is more critical for the sites that will be going forward with the initial SQF certification. So they are basically asking for mandatory conducting a required internal audit that may identify those address gaps. And this will involve obviously systematic review of policies, procedures, and other control documents. The idea is to have some competent individual who can look into the food safety programs and provides some means to strengthen continuous improvement through early detection and corrections. So the idea is to identify and resolve compliance gaps before the actual certification audit, improve audit outcomes when the audit comes, and also the mindset of continuous readiness. So it shows that site is ready for those audits without any major surprises at the certification, which is obviously initial audit. So they are asking for say what you do, prepare your programs, which means do what you say, conduct those activities based on whatever you have written in your programs and prove it. And prove is basically providing the documentation to the auditors to show, yes, this has been accomplished and is effective. So primarily it is for initial site certification that might be going to the SQF certification in the future would be very critical as far as pre-audit requirements are concerned. The recall and crisis management, again, this is something will be, as Gary has highlighted about the vertical audits, yes, there will be some kind of like improvements, how the auditors look at the traceability aspect and how ready the site is as far as the site is ready for any potential significant food safety incidents or potential recalls in the future. So enhanced protocols to strengthen recall response strategies. We will come to know more detail once the final version is available. Risk-based thinking should be applied at all times as far as those protocols have been implemented. It should also include efficient management of unforeseen food safety challenges. It could come from anywhere from the supply chain, could be anywhere from your receiving stage to the storage to assimilation, processing, anywhere where you could see there are certain challenges in terms of protecting your commodities and the products. And obviously the roles and responsibilities and communication guidance is channelized to effective means, and that would certainly contribute towards a robust recall and crisis management protocols. So there you should be expecting to see some kind of improvement as far as vertical audits are concerned and site preparedness for significant food safety incidents that may happen as they're processing their products. And the last slide talks about, more importantly, how the site should prepare for this SQF Edition 10. There are some suggestions here. You must schedule and conduct a comprehensive gap assessment against proposed changes whenever they are available. Revise your site positive food safety culture plan with measurable KPIs, which is a key in the new edition. Focus on improving your internal audit program. It means that you might have to look into competencies of the auditors or the internal auditors that are involved in ensuring all key aspects of your food safety plan have been taken into account. Review your site management procedures and update documentation. So as I said, centralized documentations and change management procedures must be implemented, and then evaluate tools that can support compliance tracking and reporting. So these are some of the KPIs that you will be looking into, and obviously digging into that data to analyze where the weaknesses are at the site and how they can be improved. And obviously training staff on Edition 10 requirements whenever the final version is available. It will be more clear, and then certainly sites will have more leverage on what to look for in terms of specific trainings for their employees. This will certainly reduce risk and build long-term resilience in your operations. And those are the actual thoughts that have been carried forward as far as Edition 10 is concerned. And with that slide, I would like to finish up with my presentation here. And obviously, we are open to any kind of questions and answers, questions you may have. And we have 10 more minutes, so certainly we can look forward to, and feel free to ask any questions so that we can certainly answer those if we are here. If not, we will be certainly contacting you if you have any specific questions, you can always come back to us. Thank you very much for being here today. And then I will now I'll listen talk about those things.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hoare. That was great. I am, like Dr. Hoare said, we're going to open up the floor here for question and answer with Gary as well. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to start with it. So the first question I have is, will the delay push back the date of auditing Edition 9 versus Edition 10 in 2026?
Yes, for sure. Well, there really hasn't been a date yet. So when we thought the release was going to be in, 1st of September, we were thinking, basically April 1st-ish of 2026 was when version 10 audits were going to start. That's obviously all now gone. So, it really depends on, basically it's 6 months after the final standard is released. That's when the audits will start. So if it does get released by the end of the year, which is kind of what we're thinking, hoping, maybe expecting, then audits would start in the second half of 2026. So if it's released by January 1st, 2026, audits would start July 1st, 2026. So you can basically say whenever the final standard is released, you're going to have 6 months transition to learn more about it and then see, when it happens. So if your audit, if your SQF audit is in the second half of 2025, it might be your last audit against version 9. Version 10 in 2026 may take effect in the second half of 2026, but we really don't know yet until we see the final version out. Once the final version's out, 6 months, then the new audits start against version 10.
Thank you. The next question we have is, can you please give examples of KPI that can be measured other than compliance?
Great, I'll let you have that.
Yeah.
All right. So regarding the KPIs, yes, certainly there are ways that site can go forward with with what kind of KPIs we are looking for. So there are various ways. Again, it depends on the site, like what they're going to do with those, what kind of data they have processed, and what kind of analysis they have done to those. KPIs could be key performance indicators in the area of storage, processing of your products, formulations. It could be certain things related to your customer satisfaction and also your supplier verifications. Are there any potential risks that might be there which you really want to really identify? Are there any recurrence issues with your certain suppliers? So the idea is to ensure that your suppliers are verified. That's just one example I would like to give here, and that they are effective in controlling those, ensuring that those ingredients or any of the raw materials that you're procuring from your suppliers are conforming to regulatory standards, as well as the standards that you might have implemented as part of your food safety program. They are not in any way contributing to any potential hazards. And certainly, yeah, it will depend on your process and the inherent dangers that might be in that process.
Some examples of KPIs that I've seen, just to throw in there real quick. Training, percent of training completed. When you're looking at like food safety objectives, a lot of folks will define food safety objectives like monthly, 95% or above of all defined training to get completed. First pass quality, a lot of folks will have a first pass quality check to make sure that, check weight or color or anything like that, the product meets specification. And again, 98% or something like that is a KPI, and they'll measure that on a, hourly or every 30-minute type basis. So those obviously customer complaints are a big one that a lot of people will measure, but make sure if you're doing customer complaints, make sure you measure it against number of units produced and not just a total number, right? Because you might say, well, we had 10 last year and this year we had 12. It's like, well, so the complaints went up. Well, we actually made 50% more product. So actually the complaints went down if you look at the ratio. So just make sure you do it against the number of units completed. But those are some examples that folks I've seen in food safety objectives for KPIs.
Thank you. All right, Prit, this one popped up when you were speaking. It says, in regards to the change process, the GSFI principle is to be based all processes on risk. What is the difference between version 10 and the principle already a part of SQF?
That's a great question, So basically what they're looking forward to is basically a formal documented risk evaluation procedures. So that's what they are talking about in their mandatory. Yes, I do believe that most of the sites, they already have those processes in place. But in my experience, they are not accurately documented. And when I say accurately documented, is basically we are talking about the risk evaluation procedures that a site might have implemented and whether they are documented and how they come to a conclusion that those risks are mitigated based on the evaluation procedures that they have implemented. So that's the key here. And the second thing is about systematic approach to assessing operational changes. Oftentimes I've seen as an auditor, there is a lack of that systematic approach whenever there are changes to the site operations. It could be anything related to new employees, coming into the plant, brand new employees, not enough experiences, a new equipment that has been commissioned. A lot of times I have seen there is a gap in commissioning of the equipment based on manufacturers' recommendations, or it could be certain aspects as far as sanitation and maintenance controls are concerned, as far as the new equipment is concerned. It could be anything related to the plant layout. So a systematic approach to assessing those operational changes is the key here. As far as mandatory change management is concerned, the new, I would say the class. And on top of it, the sites must also be looking into proactive risk mitigation strategies. So that is the key here to ensure those risk mitigation strategies are documented and they are effective and have been taken care of.
Thank you. So Gary, I have another one here. It says, can we use multiple methods of root cause identification?
And for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's no, I mean, there's two, traditional, I guess, lack of a better word, types of root cause tools. The first one is the 5 whys, which I think everybody knows that one. And that's, the simplest and, what we see most of the time on root cause analysis. But there's, the fishbone diagram, the cause and effect. There's a lot of different tools out there that, can be employed. And SQF, or any of the CBs don't dictate what type or method you have to use. You just have to do something. So when the audit occurs, you are asked to show, what was your work, what was your method of doing your root cause analysis, but you can use any tool that you like to do that.
Yeah.
And the next question we have is, what does centralization of records and documentation mean?
Okay, for the utilization, again, it's all about talking about documentation streamlining. So what are we doing in terms of improvements would be to consolidate those record keeping requirements. So when we say consolidate is basically we are talking about putting them at one place so that it has an easy access. So you're not scrambling for finding or searching those records, which you might require at the time, which it might be critical for your processes. A single section for documentation, that would be something that, again, there are some thoughts going forward to it. Again, I'm not sure what the final version would be, but that's what it is. And ensuring the idea is to simplify compliance tracking by consolidating those record keeping requirements. And that are some of the key improvements that we are looking forward to as far as edition 10 is concerned, as far as the documentation streamlining is concerned. Yeah, so easy access and efficient finding of those records.
Yeah, and right now every clause kind of has, where
Yes.
records are required. The records are at the end, right? At the last part of the clause, it's like, keep records will be maintained or something like that. So it's scattered throughout the entire standard, as opposed to being in one spot. So if you have, as an auditor or a site, if you have 2 or 3 sites potentially of the clause that don't meet those records, or the records aren't maintained, or they're not complete or filled out. It's rather than, documenting it within that specific clause, it's only going to be at the record section. So potentially you might say, well, we're not going to miss 3 or 4 points because we had records. It's all only going to be in one spot. But the downside potentially to that is if you have 2 or 3 records that might have just been a minor in 2 or 3 spots, but if they're all 2 or 3 spot, records in one spot, that actually could rise to the level of a major nonconformance. So I think,
So I think that's what it is, as Gary has clearly explained. It's basically consolidating into certain sections, not repeating for several elements altogether. It will be at one point, at one element, one section where you will be ensuring that, yes, your documents and records are available.
Okay, thank you. Do you guys have a few more minutes? We do have quite a number more of questions here. Okay, let's see here. So the next one is going to be, Gary, can you give an example of environmental monitoring surveillance activities?
Sure. Yeah. Environmental monitoring is a broad section. It can be as simple as, visual inspection of sanitation verification after wet sanitation occurs, visual checks, ATP, air monitoring, indicator checks of zone 1, to verify pre or post-op for wet sanitation. Obviously, pathogen testing in zones 2 and 3 for things like salmonella in dry plants or listeria in wet plants. All those are part of the environmental monitoring program, and the risk-based part of it basically means, based off of what you make and what type of environment you're in, what should you be looking for? So again, if you make granola bars and they're like, okay, well, we make granola bars and we only check ATP. Well, the risk says you really should be looking at salmonella in a dry environment, bakery for the zones 2 and zone 3. So, thinking of the risks and focusing on those pathogens of concern based off the risk, based off of the epidemiological evidence, recall evidence, et cetera, in industry like yours, that is how a risk-based environmental monitoring program should come about. The risk will determine the target. What are you looking at? The frequency, the sampling sites. Risks should be used to help you decide all of those activities.
So, Dr. Hoare, I'm going to circle back to the KPIs again. We have a couple of people asking this, what are a few examples of measurable KPIs in regards to food safety plan?
Again, so there are a lot of things that you can do, as we talked about. My pet peeve is about supplier verification programs, So we talk a lot about those KPIs. Yes, in KPIs, I think the mindset is about how we are monitoring key performance indicators in our plant operations. Yes, I do understand. So some of the key things that Gary has already highlighted, how are you ensuring customer complaints are to a minimum? So
Yeah.
what steps would you take in order to make sure those recurring issues with the customer, whether they are quality issues, could be something related to the packaging, could be something related to the identification of any ingredients in your food labeling aspects, So the idea is, one of the key is the customer complaints. The other one could be, as I said, how effective is your food safety culture? Because I think that's the bottom line here. So if you have an efficient food safety culture where your employees are really well trained, competency based, they will certainly take responsibilities. They will own those responsibilities. And those KPIs could be you're regularly training them, you're talking to them one-on-one. The other thing what you can do is ensuring that their voices are heard. You are getting effective feedbacks. You're taking control of those feedbacks and you're improving on those. KPIs could be anything related to your storage requirements. So are you maintaining those storage conditions? Again, it all depends what data you have. But in my condition, in my view, it would be to ensure that you are continuously looking into your processes and trying to improve based on the data that you have driven from your processes.
Thank you. So this is going to be our last question for today. It says, would changes/updates to the ERP system need to be captured in the change management edition?
I guess ERP meaning their inventory. I mean, I think the intent and I know Prit has already mentioned the change management, so I'll just add my piece of it. I mean, the change before was focused on product development, right? A new product come through the process, and specifically the change was the label, because it's a food safety focus. So is the label accurate? Is it legal? Did the food safety plan get reviewed as part of the change? And basically now the one of the potentials, again, as change management is basically, expanding it beyond new products and those few food safety checks to make sure those get done before the product goes live, to focus on how do we change? How do we make a change for anything? Management of change within the facility so that we have good communication and good training and good implementation and good follow-up, regardless of what we change. And obviously the focus is on food safety, but anything that could relate food safety. So obviously for an ERP system, potentially could be, if you change lot numbers, if you change traceability systems, if you change ERP systems, you go from one system to the next, how do you do that change, and what's the process of that change management, and making it more structured as opposed to, just do it and have people figuring it out, and, they'll find out eventually, and, after the fact, and, nobody knew what was happening, and, have a whole dedicated process by go through to which, we manage the change, and the intent of version 10 is, from what I understand, potential intent of version 10, from what I understand, is focusing on any change that could affect food safety and ensuring that you've got a structured, disciplined process by how we communicate, how we train, how we go through that change process through verification that the change was effective at the end.
Okay.
That's great. It's about change is about risk mitigation, and the idea is the site has to ensure those risks are taken care of as far as change management is concerned. And I think one of the participants are talking about, are you going to share this webinar? Certainly we would be. I think, is that right, Alison? We will be.
Yes.
We will be.
Yeah, we'll be sharing it in the follow-up. Yeah, we'll be sharing in the follow-up email. We'll also be posting it on YouTube. There'll be a lot of different ways people can access this. So, all right, that's going to be it at the end of our Q&A section here. I do want to touch base with the polling question. I asked what you guys are looking more from Bureau Veritas, and a lot of people are saying more information on certification, gap analysis. I do want to point out, I'll be on our follow-up email, I will be putting our business development manager, Kim Knoll, on it. So that way, if you have any questions, you'll be reaching out. We'll also be doing another survey on that email. So please give us all the feedback that you guys need as our clients, and we can meet those needs. I want to say thank you again to Gary Smith and Prit Hora for today. This has been very informative. Really do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yeah.